Ever carried out in Britain. Over 6 months, the National Crime Agency has coordinated raids that have led to the arrest of more than 600 people suspected of downloading and sharing obscene images of children. Doctors, teachers, scout leaders, care workers were all among those arrested, and officers say that more than 400 children who were in the care of some of the suspects have now been safeguarded as a result. Our Home Affairs correspondent Simon Israel reports.
20 years ago, there were an estimated 10,000 indecent images of children doing the rounds of the paedophile networks in the UK. Now, police say, it's tens of millions, requiring investigation on an entirely different scale. Today's results of a £10 million 6-month investigation is such an example. Operation Notarise has gathered up 660 suspected paedophiles, with over 800 buildings searched and 9,000 computers, smartphones and storage devices seized. 431 children have now been safeguarded, and of those arrested, just 39 were registered sex offenders. The suspects include doctors, teachers, scout leaders, care workers and a former police officer.
There is a difference in terms of the historical abuses that are all over the news and the sort of material that we've been dealing with. This is about tackling people who share and distribute illegal images of children online now and in the future.
Coordinated by the National Crime Agency, this is policing the web on an industrial scale. Metaphorically, turning over a stone has uncovered child abuse suspects in every corner of the country. Over 6 months, arrest numbers have averaged close to 4 a day. Police won't reveal the tactics or the techniques used, but Channel 4 News understands that 2 areas where they have focused is the cloud, where hundreds of thousands of images are posted every day, and the dark web.
The guys who've been arrested in this particular police operation have come from both the dark web, you know, the really geeky, nerdy bits that are very difficult for ordinary people to get into at all, but also from conventional bits of the internet, the ordinary bits. I suspect a lot of these guys will have been storing images and exchanging images through cloud-based services, the kind of things that we all use today to store our family pictures and videos and so on. And my understanding is the police have been getting a lot of hits using clever technical tools, finding the images and then finding the people who've been posting them and then going knocking on their doors and arresting them.
Not since Operation Ore, which began in 2002, have police managed an investigation on this scale. Then it was 7,000 names and credit card numbers accessing a US website for child porn and minimal police resources. More than a decade later, there are an estimated 50 to 60,000 suspected paedophiles in the UK.
We've never arrested more than 2,000 individuals in a single year since records began. If we carried on at that rate, the last guy that the police know about today wouldn't actually get a knock on the door, wouldn't be arrested till around 2032. It's not acceptable. We have to find better ways of closing down this terrible trade.
And those better ways inevitably lead back to the debate on just how much surveillance society is prepared to accept.
Every internet company now is providing, either free or paid for, some means for its customers to store their pictures, store their videos. We're all doing it. But I'm afraid so are the bad guys. And we have to get these big companies, these cloud service providers, to use better surveillance methods. I'm afraid that's the word that we have to use in this context to try and stop this traffic.
This was, police say, the largest ever operation of its kind in the UK, and one aim is to prevent the image gatherers crossing the line and becoming abusers.
Simon Israel, well, I'm joined now by Charlie McMurdie, former head of the Police Central E-Crime Unit that fights cybercrime, and now senior cybercrime advisor to Price Waterhouse. And in Leeds is Tink Palmer, head of the Marie Collins Foundation, which supports children who suffer from sex abuse. Charlie McMurdie first. I mean, they haven't said how they've done this, but somehow they have been reaching into internet accounts, cloud accounts, the dark web. There's a lot of snooping going on here as well, isn't there?
A lot of good police techniques as to how to interrogate the internet. and how to deal with some of the encryption and the sort of techniques that the bad guys are using to actually store and share these images. But a lot of good old-fashioned policing conducted by all the high-tech crime units around the country, looking at financial trails, looking at the IT aspect of this, to actually successfully conclude some of these arrests.
Does this mean there's now nowhere to hide?
There's always
images of abuse.
Unfortunately, the pace of change of technology, the tools that are now readily available, they're all out there, and there will be new techniques being used day in, day out to try and evade law enforcement for these individuals to carry on producing and sharing these types of images.
Tink Palmer, what do you make of the scale of this? More than 600 arrests. What does that tell us about the prevalence of people who seek paedophilia in Britain?
The number has been no surprise to me whatsoever. I think we've been very aware for a long time that most sexual abuse remains hidden. And with the internet, we have another vehicle, I guess, a conduit for spreading sexual abuse of children, particularly with the images. So I'm not surprised at all at the number. What I am really impressed by is that this effort by the police was a totally coordinated event, all police forces working together. Because the problem is we don't have capacity. We don't have capacity for our police, we don't have capacity for the children who need help with recovery and the families who need support. And I think one of the biggest issues we're going to have in the future is how are we going to really carry out a coordinated service that can try and control this issue. Whether we ever overcome it's another matter, but at least if we can try and control people's behaviours to an extent and help them change them, we may be getting somewhere.
I'm asking you about the scale of it because there is this sense of national panic at the moment, you know, that began probably with the Jimmy Savile scandal and has gone through all the high-profile figures that have followed, and now this, where we see hundreds of people. You know, inevitably, you know, people are led to think there is a paedophile around every corner. What can you tell us from a position of knowledge about actually the scale and the threat to ordinary children in Britain?
The scale of the problem is quite difficult for us to determine. We have official figures which actually don't, you know, are really the tip of the iceberg. Prevalence studies that have been carried out vary from about 1 in 6 children to 1 in 4 experiencing a form of sexual abuse. That
1 in 4 children?
Yep, one study. So we have a huge issue here. There's been a huge issue for a long time. And I don't want to create a moral panic. What I want to do, and what my colleagues want to do, is say to everybody in society, the bystanders, the professionals, the parents, teachers, etc., is to be more watchful, to ask better questions, and to allow children and help children to come forward.
OK, Charlie McMurdie, I mean, what can you add to that sense of scale? And this, I mean, those statistics are terrifying.
They are.
You know, any attempt to say, look, you know, you don't need to worry about this, we don't need to have a national panic. If we are really, I mean, if there's any truth in 1 in 4 or 1 in 6, you know, would naturally lead everyone to go, there's a massive problem here that we haven't uncovered. We've only scratched the surface.
I don't think a national panic would do any good. I think it is a massive problem. It is an unreported crime. It's an unseen crime quite often. This is a global issue. You know, a lot of these images potentially have come from abroad, children being abused abroad. It's not something that law enforcement can necessarily deal with in isolation. Parents' awareness as to what their children are doing on the internet. Are they potentially being groomed? Industry has its part to play with, are there individuals, are there staff sharing images?
Are you finding that in your new role?
Definitely. Definitely. I mean,
in the private sector?
Within PwC, we are advising our clients globally as to what they should be looking out for, what to see on their internet, you know, what their clients are actually doing, what their policies should be to actually identify when they've got members of staff who, whilst they're at work, are actually downloading, storing, viewing and sharing some of these types of images. So it needs a number of different facets to come into play. One other aspect is obviously to look at, you know, organised criminal groups that are now facilitating some of the payment systems, some of the platforms, some of the cloud services to enable this type of abuse to take place.
Charlie McMurdie, Tink Palmer, thank you both very much indeed.
Still to come tonight, we talk with the artist Grayson Perry about a new exhibition featuring works voted for by the public. He famously included Rolf Harris in a scarf about British art. So have the convicted sex offender's paintings been devalued by his crimes?